Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really profound psychological framework developed by Dr. Faith Onia. It tackles a silent epidemic that's quietly but powerfully shaping the destinies of women, marriages, and literally entire societies across Africa. Now, I know it's a heavy topic, but it is absolutely crucial that we pay attention to this if we're ever going to truly understand the root causes of generational trauma. So let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the father wound epidemic, then move on to the silent destructive force. From there, we'll look at dysfunctional adult patterns, followed by trauma disguised as wisdom. And don't worry, after exploring the heavy realities of this trauma, we will wrap up with pathways to healing, exploring some very practical societal solutions. Part 1. The father wound epidemic, understanding the roots of bad parenting. Here, we're going to impartially look at how Dr. Ania categorizes the different forms of fatherly abuse that act almost like a slow poison to a young girl. So, one major dynamic identified in the source material is the tyrant father syndrome. Now, in many African cultures, fathers are taught from a very young age that they are the unquestioned head of the house, right? But the tragedy here is that they often confuse headship with absolute control. You see, the tyrant father decides everything: what school his daughter attends, what career path she takes, and he commands without ever explaining himself. Any questioning? That's swiftly punished. He fundamentally misunderstands that true headship actually means providing protection, care, and guidance, rather than just acting as a dictator. This need for control ultimately branches out into specific forms of childhood abuse. We're looking at emotional abuse, like conditional love, where affection has to be continuously earned, or gaslighting. Then there's mental abuse, which involves emotional blackmail, or isolating a girl from her friends and educational opportunities, usually in the name of protection. And finally, physical abuse, which creates deep, lingering body memory. So the crucial point is, together these abuses teach a young girl some terrible lessons: that her feelings are entirely invalid, her own body is inherently unsafe, and that love is really nothing more than a performance she has to put on just to survive. You are useless. You will never amount to anything. These are the exact kinds of devastating criticisms that girls hear in these environments. And the psychological toll this takes on a daughter's self-worth, it is catastrophic. It plants a seed deep in her subconscious that she simply isn't enough, practically guaranteeing she's going to seek validation in all the wrong places as she grows up. Which brings us to part 2, the silent destructive force, the impact of the absent father. Dr. Onia describes this particular absence as a true silent killer of destinies. Now, there is a really stark contrast between physical and emotional absence. Physical absence is, well, obvious. The father lives abroad, works in another city, or maybe has disappeared entirely. But emotional absence? That is often much more insidious. This is the father who is physically present in the home, literally sitting right there, but he completely ignores his daughter. He never asks about her dreams, he never celebrates her wins, and when he does speak, it's only in anger. Being there but not there makes a daughter feel like an invisible burden. It leads to these deep, agonizing questions about her own value. She starts wondering, if my own father doesn't want me, is any man ever going to truly want me? And that leads us into part 3, dysfunctional adult patterns, the long-term consequences. Let's trace how these childhood roots logically impact these girls as they grow into adulthood. Tracing the tragedy of this timeline, we see that in the childhood years, a father's love is felt as purely conditional and performative. Moving into the teenage years, that same daughter, feeling completely starved of worth, begins desperately seeking validation from strangers or groups. By her adult years, she might even engage in transactional relationships or prostitution just to survive. Dr. Onia's framework shows us exactly how this logically evolves. For some of these women, viewing prostitution or transactional relationships isn't necessarily seen as a moral failure first. It's a relational one. It's almost a way of finally exerting control over one's own body and income, simply because they were never protected at home. On the flip side of that, you have this pattern, the fierce declaration of, "I don't need a man." This is the fiercely independent persona. Now, these women are often highly intelligent, incredibly capable, and immensely talented. But Dr. Anya reveals that beneath this boldness lies intense fear, deep unresolved wounds, and quite frankly, an inability to recognize a truly healthy man. because they only know men as oppressors, abusers, or absentees. When they actually meet a gentle, respectful man, they just don't trust him.
Part 4. Trauma disguised as wisdom. The rise of broken influencers. This is where things get really urgent because this trauma is spreading like wildfire on modern social media.
All men want is sex and money. You must manipulate men to get what you want. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this toxic advice is being taught by broken women influencers across the internet. They've figured out that speaking from their unhealed pain gains followers, likes, and ultimately money. But objectively, as Dr. Ania points out, they aren't teaching wisdom at all. They are simply teaching their own trauma, just wrapped up in a glamorous package. It's monetized pain. When we juxtapose what the followers see with the hidden reality, it's honestly heartbreaking. The followers, who are often just innocent, confused girls looking for some sort of guidance, they see independence, financial freedom, and boldness. But the reality behind the screen? It's emotional emptiness, a terrified avoidance of real love, and a bleeding father wound. This creates a really tragic self-perpetuating cycle where broken women become teachers, effectively raising a whole new generation of broken girls who just copy the toxic behavior without ever understanding the painful root behind it. But there is hope. Part 5. Pathways to Healing. Culturally Relevant Solutions for Africa. Let's pivot and look at Dr. Onya's multi-layered solutions to finally break this generational cycle. Before any specific steps can be taken, society has to dismantle some deep cultural and religious roadblocks. This means entirely rejecting the cultural belief that women must suffer in silence. It means putting an end to protecting abusers just to save the family name. And it also means moving past well-meaning but ultimately damaging church messages that simply tell girls to endure your abuser or pray for them while they remain in harm's way. The core message here is that true forgiveness should never, ever mean forcing a victim to stay in chains. Let's move to and see how this builds into actionable steps at the family level. Step 1. Fathers must actively choose to transform from tyrants into protectors who affirm their daughter's inherent value. Step 2. Mothers need to step up to serve as unshakable safe spaces, fiercely protecting their daughters and teaching them emotional intelligence. And step 3. Families as a whole must draw a hard line to stop physical abuse entirely and really start normalizing healthy, open conversations within the home. But the healing has to go beyond the front door, right? Looking at broader community and mental health solutions. Step 1 is bringing emotional health education straight into schools so children learn about boundaries early on. Step 2 requires training African-centered counselors. This is absolutely critical. We need counselors who deeply understand the local culture, the language, and the specific family structures, rather than just copying and pasting a Western model. And step 3 is creating safe community reporting structures and support groups so women can actually hear together, supported by healthy media narratives that champion true recovery over that toxic independence we talked about earlier. We leave you with this final provocative thought. Are we ready to stop normalizing the father wound and start healing the innocent? Dr. Anya's work is a powerful call to action that challenges all of us to reflect on the systems we uphold. The future of these women, and honestly the future of these societies, depends on turning pain into genuine healing. Thank you for joining this explainer, and we really hope this knowledge leaves you eager to champion societal healing wherever you are.